Hey there, Cinemaster fans. Hope you're ready for some movie magic. Let's dive right in. The story begins with a group of reckless young people riding their motorcycles and entering a large forest filled with darkness and silence, like the heart of gloom itself. The road is dark, but suddenly, an old truck that looks like it's straight out of a horror movie. Guys, this looks like a movie truck, not a regular one, Luke said as he saw the truck in front of him. But instead of passing by and hoping no one noticed him, he decided to throw a rock at the windshield. The rock flew like a missile and bounced back on his head. "Stop joking around and let's see what's going on," said Kirk, who decided to be the hero of today's movie, and opened the truck's back door. The door opened with a scream of horror, a white bag wrapped around something unnatural looking. Kirk leaned closer to smell, and the smell was unbearable. Before he could get himself into more trouble, the door slammed shut with a thunderous sound. All the young people started to panic and said, "Let's get out of here." They jumped on their motorcycles, all speeding. But the truck didn't wait. The truck began to unleash some surprises, like a flying rope trailing behind it with a long knife at the end. The knife went straight for Kirk's leg, turning him into a deer caught in a trap. His friends jumped on him like men and said, "We won't leave you." They dragged him into the forest, but the truck wasn't going to let them go. The young men stood in the forest, unsure of what was happening. Kirk was clutching his leg. "Guys, do something!" Kirk screamed as he looked at his friends, who started trying to pull the knife out of his leg. Luke said, "All right, calm down. I'll try to remove it. Hang in there." He pulled, but the knife refused to budge an inch. The problem is, the rope attached to the knife started moving on its own, pulling Kirk behind it like a fish caught on a hook. Kirk screamed, "Guys, I don't want to die." Luke looked at his other friend and said, "Why are you standing there? Grab him quickly before he gets dragged." The rope was stronger than all of them combined, dragging Kirk across the ground. Luke tried to hold his friend, but the pull was too much. And then, suddenly, the guy on the red motorcycle decided to bail. Their friend on the red bike acted like in the movies and sped away safely. Kirk got stuck next to the truck, tears in his eyes as if he knew it was the end. His friend who had just passed by told him, "We'll look for someone to help us. Wait here and don't move." But suddenly, Luke looked up at the sky and he saw a human descending like a rocket from above. The body smashed onto the ground next to them. Luke's face turned pale and said, "What's going on, guys?" The truck, which had been silent until that moment, suddenly revealed a strange creature, the Creeper himself. He climbed onto the truck and started flapping his wings like a bird from hell. The young men froze in place until the Creeper decided to climb down from the truck and stand before them. They started running, but the Creeper looked at them, extended his hand, and suddenly pulled out a long spear, like an advanced hunting gun. And the first shot pierced through two of them at once. Both fell to the ground like uprooted trees, and the Creeper stood there with a devilish smile. One of the young men who had been running was still breathing. He was groaning and trying to crawl away. The Creeper, as if he wasn't in a hurry, he walked up to their corpses like a hunter, ensuring his prey was finished. He extended his hand and retrieved one of his friends who was still alive, said to him in a trembling voice, "This monster wakes from his slumber and spends 23 days searching for food. He loves humans, not just eating and drinking, but he watches, hunts, and finishes off his victims in the most horrifying ways." Hours later, the police arrived at the scene. They stood in front of the truck that looked like a moving horror house. One of the officers decided to open the back door, and with the first movement, the smell hit them all in the face. The corpses hanging from the ceiling, piled on the floor, and some rotting as if they'd been there for years. A sight that made them all step back 2 steps. But one of the officers was reckless. He said, "We won't leave the bodies here." He reached out to pull one of the bodies, and suddenly a trap snapped onto his hand with incredible speed. The officer let out a scream that shook the entire forest. His hand was severed at the elbow. The sheriff said, "No one touches anything." They all stood looking at each other, traps everywhere, bodies and schemes, as if the Creeper isn't just a monster, he's a genius killer. The special team formed by Sheriff David, led by Captain Dan, is trying to face the Creeper with all their courage. Captain Dan was talking to Sheriff David about the disaster called the Creeper. David told him, "Look, Dan, this thing killed 3 officers and it's not far-fetched to think it'll finish us off too. This monster isn't just strong, it's planning like it's got an army." Dan replied, keeping his composure. "So anyone who gets close to its truck will get shredded?" While the team was trying to open the truck's door, chaos erupted. A rope flew out of the truck like an attacking snake, and the knife at its end struck one of the officers. Dan looked at the scene and said, "Guys, this isn't a truck, it's a death machine." All the officers stepped back, no one wanting to get closer. David decided to talk to Dan privately and told him, "If the Creeper finds out we got near its truck, it'll start hunting us one by one." This monster doesn't let anyone touch its belongings. One of the officers came and said, "We brought a tow truck and dragged the truck away." Dan exploded in anger and said, "So you decided to kill the people who were safe? The creeper won't let the tow truck driver live." Meanwhile, Frank, the tow truck driver, was pulling the truck away. Frank was driving calmly, and suddenly, the creeper appeared in front of him, holding a large axe. The man tried to brake, but the creeper jumped onto the truck, breaking the chains that were holding it. The truck rolled back on its own. Dan and the officers arrived just as the creeper stood atop the truck and flew away. The next morning, the world was unusually quiet. A crow stood at the door of an old house. The elderly woman, Jilan, stepped out of the house looking around the place. The atmosphere was calm, but something was wrong, as if nature itself was watching a horror movie. Jilan looked at the tree in front of her house and saw someone waving at her from afar. Addison, Jilan's granddaughter, was trying to buy feed for her horse. She went into the grocery store, but the shopkeeper told her, "Young lady, you owe a lot of money from last time. I can't give you anything today." Addison was frustrated and left the store feeling upset. But then, Buddy, the shopkeeper's son, decided to step in. Buddy had admired Addison for a long time and decided to help her without asking his father's permission. "Don't worry, Addison. I'll get you the feed you need." He said it with a smile, but it was clear he was stepping into something bigger than himself. Addison blushed slightly and replied, "Thank you, but I'll pay you back soon." Buddy responded confidently, "Don't think about repaying me. Think about what might happen to the horse if it stays without food." The atmosphere calmed a bit, and the girl took the feed, and they started heading to the stable. On the way, they passed by a field where some horses were running right and left as if someone was chasing them. Buddy stopped and said, "Something's wrong. Horses don't run like this for no reason." The owner of the field stood nervously, and his workers were hiding under an old tank, as if they were avoiding something incomprehensible. Buddy approached him and asked, "What's wrong? What's happening here?" The man replied in a trembling voice, "There's something here. You need to call the police immediately." Buddy went to his car to call the police. He searched for his phone, and suddenly, blood splattered on the windshield. A wounded and battered human stood in front of the car, breathing heavily. Buddy and Edison screamed, and before they could react, the creeper appeared. The creeper descended calmly. He looked around the place and headed toward the tank where the workers were hiding. One of the workers tried to escape, but the creeper caught him and lifted his body into the air as if it were a leaf. The sound of the tank overturning could be heard from afar. Buddy said, "We need to escape now. What's happening here isn't natural." Buddy rushed back to the car and said, "Get in, Edison, we're leaving." Edison got in, and Buddy tried to start the car, but the car wouldn't start. Buddy looked at Edison and said, "I suspect this car has fallen under the creeper's gaze. We're in trouble." Suddenly, the creeper appeared in front of the car, standing as if preparing for his special ritual. He closed his eyes and began sniffing the air around the car, but it was evident that the creeper was more focused on Edison. The creeper flew toward Edison and stood by her window, extending his finger to wipe the blood off the glass. He stared at her intently, began sniffing her, and suddenly, the creeper laughed loudly. With one leap, the creeper shattered the window completely, extended his massive hand, and pulled Edison out of the car like a small toy. Buddy tried to act, shouting, but he couldn't move an inch. Before he could even step out of the car, the creeper flew into the sky, carrying Edison. When the creeper reached his phantom car, he didn't kill Edison. He opened the back door of the car and tossed Edison inside. The place was dark, and the smell of death filled the air. Edison tried to comprehend what was happening, but suddenly she saw someone standing in the corner. Kirk? It was the boy who had been injured earlier, and he was still alive. Kirk looked at her and said, "Edison, how did you get here?" She replied, "The creeper took me, and you?" Kirk responded, "From the start, I knew that no one here would escape easily, but maybe together we can find a way out." Kirk told her, "The back door is booby-trapped. If we try to exit through it, we'll die. The only solution is the front door." Edison looked at him and said, "And what's stopping us from leaving now?" Kirk replied, "The creeper is watching. We'll need to move the moment he leaves the car." Kirk decided to move toward the front door of the car, thinking it was the only way out. As soon as he touched the handle, everything turned upside down. A spear flew from beside the door, piercing his head like an arrow. Kirk fell to the ground. Edison froze, unable to breathe. The moment felt like a direct shot to the terror inside her heart. Far from the car, Jillian, the mother whose life had been turned upside down by the creeper, was trying to understand what had happened to her son Kenny 23 years ago. Jillian decided to unearth the buried hand Kenny had hidden back then. She retrieved it, knowing that what's coming is a greater danger than what's past. She placed the hand on the table before her. The hand was still moving, as if alive. Jillian tried to reach out and touch it, but suddenly the hand latched onto her arm, lifting her into the air like a toy. Jillian's body began twisting in a horrifying manner, and her eyes turned completely white. The moment was filled with muffled screams and boiling blood. Elsewhere, Dan and his team were preparing for the biggest showdown of their lives. Michael arrived in his fully equipped car, carrying a massive gun. Michael looked at the team and said, "These aren't ordinary weapons. They're made for a monster like the Creeper." Sheriff David replied, "It doesn't matter what we have. What matters is that it ends today." The entire team gathered and began their mission to hunt the Creeper. Shortly after, Jillian began to recover from the nightmare that had happened to her. Her body was exhausted, but she felt something had changed. She started hearing a voice in her head telling her, "The Creeper wants you. The only solution is confrontation." When Jillian touched the Creeper's hand, everything changed. Suddenly, it was as if she saw his life story, which resembled nightmares. The Creeper is a mix of evil, fear, and revenge. When Jillian regained her consciousness, David and Dan were standing, waiting to hear the secret from her. Jillian said, "I can't tell you." David tried to press her further. "If there's a secret that can help us stop the Creeper, you must tell us." Jillian refused, but Dan had made up his mind to act on his own. Dan looked at the Creeper's hand, still moving on the table. He said to David, "If Jillian won't talk, I'll find out the secret myself." David tried to stop him, saying, "Don't do it. It could destroy you." But Dan's decision was firm. As soon as he touched the Creeper's hand, everything turned upside down. The hand moved quickly, wrapping around his arm like a snake, pulling him to the ground. Dan convulsed on the spot, his body twisting, and his eyes turned white. When Dan regained consciousness, he looked terrified as if he'd seen the devil himself. David approached and asked him, "What did you see?" Dan remained silent, but he knew the Creeper wouldn't spare anyone, and what lay ahead was the final confrontation. Michael, the team member always ready with heavy weapons, received news of an overturned car on Highway 9. He said, "This is the Creeper's work. This is definitely a sign that he's here." Dan decided not to waste time and said to the team, "It's time to move. If we're going to stop the Creeper, we need to start now." Michael was at the front in his car equipped with a machine gun, capable of firing thousands of rounds per minute. Dan and David were behind him, all ready for the big confrontation. Dan and David saw the Creeper and his ghostly car driving down the highway as if taunting them. David, who was extremely angry, decided to shoot at the car's tires. He said, "If we disable it, we can stop him." But the tires were bulletproof. The bullets bounced off them and ricocheted back toward their car. David, instead of giving up, decided to shoot at the body of the car itself, but the same result. Everything about the car was armored. The bullets bounced back, hitting their car's body. The Creeper opened a small window in his car and threw a bomb at their car. This wasn't an ordinary bomb. It was equipped with a tracking system. Dan, who was driving, managed to swerve the car at the last moment and evade the bomb, but it started to chase after them. David said, "This isn't just a bomb, it's following us." Dan replied, "Then we need to blow it up before it reaches us." David pulled out his pistol and fired a single shot, and the bomb exploded in the air before reaching them. Michael appeared in his car, equipped with a massive automatic gun. But Dan saw what was coming and quickly told him over the radio, "Don't shoot, Michael. That weapon will hurt us more than him." But Michael didn't listen and pressed the button, and the gun fired a barrage of bullets at the Creeper's car. Just as Dan had predicted, the bullets bounced off the car. All the bullets ricocheted back toward Michael's car, hitting him and his driver. The car exploded within seconds, and Michael and his driver were killed instantly. Dan and David stared at the scene in shock. The Creeper threw another bomb, but this time there wasn't enough time to escape. The bomb hit Dan and David's car, flipping it over like a tin can. But luck was on their side. Both survived the accident, though injured. As they were trying to pull themselves together, the Creeper appeared in his car. He stopped in front of them, as if signaling that the battle was nearing its end. The Creeper began to press harder, stopping in front of them with his car. David decided not to wait, grabbed his rifle, and stepped out of the car. Dan tried to calm things down and told him, "Don't do anything reckless. The Creeper smells your fear, and if he senses you're scared, you're done for." Dan's eyes fell on Michael's car, which was wrecked beside them. But he noticed that the big gun they had relied on was still intact. He decided to run to the car to try and operate the weapon himself, knowing it was a huge risk. The Creeper stepped out of his car, holding his large axe, and began walking toward David slowly, like a classic horror movie. David raised his rifle and fired the first shot, but the Creeper was faster. Using his axe to deflect the bullet, David didn't give up. He fired a second shot, and this time, the bullet knocked the Creeper's hat off his head. The Creeper glared at David with his red eye, and he began moving faster. And David tried to fire a third shot, but the Creeper used something even stranger: his teeth, which he fired like arrows. The tooth projectile entered the barrel of David's rifle and completely destroyed it. David now only had a small pistol, knowing it wasn't enough against this monster. The creeper was ready to finish him off with his large axe. Dan managed to activate Michael's massive automatic gun and began turning it toward the creeper. But luck wasn't on his side. The gun jammed. The weapon had reached its limit, making things worse. The creeper seized the moment and attacked Dan with all his might, spreading his massive black wings and flying toward the gun. Dan tried to reactivate it, but time was against him. The creeper raised his axe, ready for a blow that would end everything. Dan was still holding the automatic gun, knowing it was his last chance. The creeper was flying around the area with his giant black wings like a death eagle. He managed to activate the gun and began firing a barrage of bullets at the creeper. Bullets were flying like rain, but the creeper was as if nothing was happening. The creeper seized the moment of tension and flew at Dan like an arrow. Dan tried to turn the gun toward him, but the creeper was faster. With one swing of his axe, Dan's head flew off. David was standing far away and saw everything. He realized the creeper wouldn't stop and that he had to escape by any means. Elsewhere, Gillian was at her house preparing for the confrontation. She picked up her shotgun and looked around. She was sure the creeper was near. Suddenly, the headlights appeared from afar. Gillian thought it was the creeper and cautiously approached the door. She opened it while holding the weapon, but standing outside was Buddy. Buddy said to her, "Addison, the creeper took her. There's no time. We have to move." At the same time, Addison was inside the truck, knowing she was prey waiting for the moment disaster would strike. She heard the creeper's voice coming from outside. She quickly hid under a large white sack, pretending to be dead. The creeper entered. He looked around and went straight to the sack she was hiding under. Quietly, he lifted the sack and looked at her with a terrifying smile. The creeper decided to prepare her for his feast. He grabbed his large knife and began getting ready. But at the moment he turned his back to grab something from the truck, Addison jumped and hid in a dark corner. The creeper thought he had Addison secured. While in his grasp, she activated the trap button next to the passenger seat. A metal spear shot out at lightning speed, piercing the creeper's head and popping his eye out. The creeper screamed, but he was still standing. Addison took advantage of the moment, freed herself, and jumped out of the truck. She got up quickly and started running with everything she had. The creeper tried to fly after her with his giant wings, but found himself losing balance. Dan had been hiding, waiting for the right moment, and fired a single shot at the creeper's wing. The wing literally exploded, and the creeper fell to the ground like a broken monster, but it struck her jacket and knocked her to the ground. Addison thought the end was near, especially when she saw the creeper coming toward her, holding his large axe. But suddenly, a large truck came from afar, speeding at full force. The truck hit the creeper, sending him flying. Addison quickly got up and decided not to look back. Running was her only option. The creeper, for the first time in his life, felt something close to weakness. The monster that always scared people and hunted them was now battered and broken. The creeper was filled with rage and decided to vent his fury on anyone. He found the truck driver who hit him, and without mercy, finished him off in moments. The creeper used the victim's body to start healing himself. The creeper decided to go to Galan's house to retrieve his severed hand. He arrived at the place and found the hand buried in the ground, along with a small handwritten note. "I know what you are, and I won't be afraid of you." The creeper, who rarely gets affected by anything, felt a surge of anger that made him scream. He grabbed his severed hand and started breaking it furiously, as if it were the cause of all his troubles. The creeper knew his time was limited. He had only 23 days before entering his 23-year-long hibernation. He decided to leave Addison for now and focus on a bigger goal, something worthy of the end of his spree. Addison, who thought she was alone, met Buddy and her grandmother Gillian. The scene was emotional, and Addison's tears flowed as she hugged Buddy. That moment felt like a small relief in the midst of a big nightmare. Buddy and Addison confessed their love for each other, as if trying to find light in the midst of darkness. But the creeper is definitely still waiting for the right moment to return for revenge. And that's the end of today's summary. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell to get more